Immediately, Erdogan sharply pulls the rug out from under the Kremlin. Russian offices are being dangerously enticed. The Black Sea route for the Russians has suddenly narrowed. The sea is now not a gateway but a trap. Putin didn't even have time to recover. Turkey's decision was a cold shower. Erdogan is showing a toughness that Moscow definitely did not expect. Will the Kremlin be able to recover from such a blow? And why could this move by Turkey change the balance of power in the region? More on this ahead. The end of relations between Turkey and Russia. Ankara has reaffirmed its support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and its readiness to help rebuild the country after the war. Turkish President Recep Erdogan announced this during a joint briefing with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. We have once again reaffirmed our commitment to the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of our strategic partner, Ukraine. Turkey is always ready to discuss with Russia any proposals that would accelerate a ceasefire and pave the way for a just and lasting peace. In response, Volodymyr Zelensky emphasizes that Turkey has become a key partner not only in matters of security, but also in the restoration of prisoner exchange processes. This is a process that Ukraine hopes to restart by the end of the year.
Right now, many processes have become more active. We are trying to ensure that all this activity is directed specifically toward peace, for a just peace and guaranteed security.
If you look at Turkish policy, it has always been aimed at its own interests, both in relation to Ukraine and in relation to Russia. That is, Turkey does not refuse to trade with the Russian Federation. They do everything that serves their own interests. Of course, right now we are falling into Turkey's sphere of interest. They support us. To a certain extent, they support us. Turkey's policy very clearly reflects this 1,000-year-old Eastern approach, very deliberate, very competent, where above all, in any situation, their own interests come first, especially economic interests.
However, a certain tension in the relations between Russia and Turkey is still not being felt. Russian tourists found themselves stranded on board the Astoria Grande cruise liner off the coast of Turkey. In Istanbul, the ship was not granted permission to enter the port. There were more than 600 people on board, residents of the Krasnodar region, Moscow, and the Leningrad region, who had purchased a 2-week cruise costing about $3,000. The liner was supposed to call at Marmaris, Antalya, Bodrum, and Izmir. Earlier, a similar situation occurred with the ferry Sibrich, which was supposed to resume cargo and passenger service between Trabzon and Sochi after a 14-year hiatus. Upon arriving in Sochi, the vessel was unable to dock and return to Turkey. The Russian authorities explained the refusal by citing the alleged technical unpreparedness of the ports and the inability to ensure the safe reception of vessels. The media are already reporting on Turkey's responses to the actions of the Russian authorities. The imposition of transport restrictions is becoming a tool of pressure and an indicator of Turkey's shift towards supporting Ukraine and limiting Russia's capabilities in the Black Sea.
Turkey is also an incredibly important and strategic logistics hub for Russia. We must not forget that both the crucial oil pipelines and the essential gas pipelines passing through Turkey primarily supply vital gas and oil resources from Russia, playing a significant role in their energy distribution. Turkey is a truly significant hub not only for Ukraine, but also an incredibly important and indeed the sole crucial hub for Russia, playing an essential and pivotal role.
Meanwhile, Erdogan held a phone conversation with the Russian dictator. According to the Kremlin, the parties discussed bilateral relations, the war between Russia and Ukraine, as well as regional and global issues. Putin allegedly confirmed the Russian side's interest in resolving the conflict through political and diplomatic means. An exchange of views was held regarding the situation around Ukraine, including in the context of American proposals for a peaceful settlement. Vladimir Putin noted that these proposals, in the version we have reviewed, are in line with the discussions held at the Russian-American summit in Alaska and, in principle, could serve as the basis for a final peaceful settlement, according to the Kremlin. President Erdogan, for his part, declared Turkey's readiness to continue efforts aimed at achieving a just and lasting peace, and to participate in any diplomatic initiatives that will facilitate direct dialogue between the parties. Turkey is ready, as before, to contribute to all diplomatic initiatives and plans that will promote direct contacts between the parties and pave the way for lasting peace in our region. Although Ankara seeks to maintain its role as a mediator in Russian-Ukrainian relations, its recent actions demonstrate an increasingly clear orientation toward international law and support for Ukrainian sovereignty.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
An unexpected turn of events. China is taking away Russia's last levers of influence, and Putin has found himself on his knees before Beijing. Xi Jinping is squeezing the last bit of influence out of the Russian Federation. Trump nods approvingly, while in the Kremlin they hope this nightmare will soon be over. Moscow's circle of friends is rapidly shrinking. Will China really dare to say goodbye to Russia completely and rid itself of Kremlin influence? We'll talk about this in just a moment.
China is abandoning Russia. Yes, you heard that right. Beijing skillfully pretends to be a partner, but in reality it uses Moscow as a weak spot. And
in our country, there's a saying that has become a catchphrase. Russians and Chinese are brothers forever. But
here's what's interesting. Recently, Xi spoke on the phone with Trump and stated that he supports the US's peace efforts to resolve the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It sounds nice in words, but in reality,
what exactly is truly happening here right now? As for what's happening on the peace settlement track in terms of the tools for peacefully resolving the Russian-Ukrainian war, the absolutely main and crucial point of this very important message should be the following. Russia must not, under any circumstances, win this devastating war, and Ukraine, consequently and most assuredly, must not by any means lose.
And one more thing. The leaders of the countries have agreed on visits. Trump is already planning to go to China in April.
It'll be intense. For Trump to sign the desired trade agreement with China, specifically in April, for example, during a potential meeting in Beijing, that's a big question. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing deeper here, especially regarding the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war within these time frames. April 2026, a meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump in Beijing.
So what is China doing wrong in relation to Russia? It would seem everything is fine.
But
it's all because China is making very good money off Russia. The prices of export goods supplied to the country have increased on average by 87%.
Relations between Russia and China have always been very untrustworthy. And if we think they're friends, they're not. There's a good word for this. They're fellow travelers. Russia and China are fellow travelers. It's beneficial for China. A weak Russia, a weak Putin is beneficial for China. It's advantageous for China to buy raw materials cheaply. It's advantageous for China to then sell goods to the Russian Federation at a very high price. Russia has no other way out, essentially.
But it's not just about goods. China is gradually entering Russian regions, gaining access to territories and resources.
You know, there are already examples in the Far East where a small settlement has become predominantly Chinese, and now they even participate in municipal elections there.
And Russia, in turn, is becoming increasingly dependent on China. And
doesn't this kind of relationship suit Putin? Again, of course not. Of course it doesn't suit him. Well, because Putin has phantom pains from the USSR, basically, throughout his entire presidency, he has tried to restore some kind of form of greatness, let's call it gathering Russian lands. But in reality, he is simply leading the Russian Federation to collapse, to a complete, absolute collapse, to financial bankruptcy.
Beijing is increasingly strengthening its influence in Central Asia while pushing Moscow into the background. This probably can't help but worry the old man in the Kremlin.
it is necessary to steadfastly strengthen the friendship between China and Kazakhstan, make joint efforts to promote comprehensive cooperation, and make a greater contribution to peace in the region and around the world, as well as to development, stability, and the positive energy of Chinese-Kazakh relations.
But here is the main question. What really drives China? A true partnership with Russia?
According to this, the communication reflects the strategic nature of Russian-Chinese relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level.
Or is Beijing simply taking advantage of the situation and acting in its own interests?
They are absolutely not interested in Russia truly winning this protracted war, because if Vladimir Putin ultimately wins this significant war, then he effectively restores his geopolitical agency and considerable influence. He then starts talking to all the major global players, for example, to the United States of America and the People's Republic of China on a completely equal footing, which is absolutely and fundamentally not in line with China's crucial strategic interests. Yes, this position is hidden.
China talks about friendship, but only acts when it benefits them. He profits from Russia, strengthens his influence, and at the same time builds relations with the US. And Moscow is becoming increasingly dependent on Beijing's decisions.